Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our seminar, Understanding the Competition. First of all, could I just make sure that everybody's got their mobile phones turned off? At least I'm not going to embarrass myself by it going off. We have quite a significant panel session towards the end of this seminar, which you'll have the opportunity to lay questions to our illustrious panel representing all the main processing potato producers in Northwest Europe. As you were entering the seminar, you were given one of these reports, which has been issued this morning, and this is our latest update on our view of the influences of cost of production across Northwest Europe. And Jay Wootton will shortly talk about the detail in which has gone behind this report. Okay, if I can just sort of ask our panel to introduce themselves. And the first one is representing the Netherlands, Mr. Victor Phaff.
Thank you. My name is Victor Phaff. I am here also being the secretary of the NEPG, the Northwestern European Potato Growers. It's a foundation of the 5 major potato producing countries. The UK, Belgium, France, the Netherlands and Germany. These countries produce more than 60% of all potatoes which are growing in the EU. And the objective of the NEPG is not being a political organization, but an exchange of market information. And one of the good examples is this study about cost-price comparison, which was supervised and under the leadership of the HADB, but with the support of all the members of the NEPG. Moreover, we are exchanging information about the area, about quality, about prices, and about trends in the market. We actually had a meeting here yesterday evening before this British Potato Council. Talking about my country, the Netherlands, because I am a Dutchman. What is remarkable for the Netherlands? Well, one of the things that I always see is the high price, the high value of the ground. In my area, I live in the new reclaimed polders of Flevoland, and their prices of £75,000 per hectare are not an exception, agricultural ground. And that brings the focus upon space. And space is our problem because we are just a very small country. If we want to grow potatoes, we have to get more potatoes from a hectare. If other countries want to grow more potatoes, they just plant another couple of more hectares because there's more ground available. And then you see that in the Netherlands the yield per hectare is the highest of all countries because we have to get as much as possible from a hectare. We've seen other trends. We've seen the upcoming importance of processing over the last 10 years. We've also seen that the Netherlands changed from a large fresh potato exporter into a large fresh potato importer for their processing industry. We see other trends, declining fresh consumption, also in the Netherlands, year by year, unfortunately. And we see other trends like our importance in the Netherlands for the export of seed potatoes, what we call our high-tech export activity. So these are some remarkable items for my country.
Thank you, Victor. Now representing Belgium, Mr. Daniel Ryckmans.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Ryckmans. I work for the Walloon Potato Organization. That's the French-speaking part of Belgium in the south. I've been working there for 21 years, and before that I had done some extension work in the Congo and in Venezuela. My organization is an interprofessional body, so we regroup scientists working on potatoes, seed potato growers, ware potato growers, packers and processors. We are a very small team, we are only 4, and we give advice on everything about potatoes, be it technical or economical. One thing I can say, three things which are of some interest to you about the Belgian potato industry. One is that 25 to 30 years ago we had 50,000 hectares of potatoes and we were processing 500,000 tons of potatoes. And the last years we have 80,000 hectares of potato and we have been processing between 3.5 and 4 million tons of potatoes. And in fact, the last 7 years, we haven't been able to get enough potatoes out of our own soils. And so we have been introducing potatoes from France, the Netherlands, and Germany at a rate of about 500,000 tons to 700,000 tons every year, just to feed the industry. A second point about the Belgian sector is that 20 years ago, 25 years ago, Binche was still the main variety with about 75% of all potatoes grown, which were Binche. And now Binche has gone down under 50%. And varieties like Fontane or Innovator or other varieties have been going up. And then maybe the last thing I want to say is to try and explain how come the industry is so dynamic and so boosting. There's a company called Klaargebouwd in western Belgium, near the French border, and they process 1 million tons a year. So that's at least 25% of all the potatoes grown or used in Belgium. And they have 2 plants, and on September the 7th, one of the 2 plants burned down. And so the capacity went from 1 million tons to 680 tons from one day to the other. But on September 9, they were already clearing up the first factory, and they had plans to extend the second factory with a 3rd line and a 4th line during the autumn. And they worked day and night, and beginning of October they were starting the 3rd line with 4,000 tons a week. That's 200,000 tons per year. And 3 weeks later they were starting the 4th line with a capacity of 3,000 tons a week, so that's 150,000 tons. And so a month and a half after the fire, they had gone back to the initial production of 1 million tons. And in January, where the first plant in Newchurch burned down, in January, hopefully, they should be starting the new unit with another 300,000 tons. So that's just an example, but the potato industry is very dynamic and very reactive.
Thanks, Daniel. Representing France, Arnaud Delacour.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Donc my name is Arnaud Delacour. I am a producer, actually. I am a producer for the process industry, both starch industry and food process industry, French fries and crisps for export. I am a farmer in the Picardy area, which is for you very close to the Champagne area, Reims and so, 80 kilometers up north of Paris. I am also the chairman of the UNPT. UNPT is, the organization representing the French farmers in France, producing potatoes except the seeds potatoes. You've got the figures of the statistics, the figures of the production in France, but roughly we are representing 18,000 growers, and on the 3 markets, fresh market, process market, and starch market, process for food. France is specialized in exportations. It's one of our strengths, actually. We are very well localized in Europe to supply the southern Europe, Spain, Italy, and also the Belgium industry, as Daniel said. Okay. What I can also focus, I can make a focus on the one good point in France is the sanitary situation of the soil, which give us a good opportunity to develop seeds and export seeds, which is a good point from France. But we've got also some weakness, okay, where I can take about our weakness. For example, we've got a very tough administrations regarding environmental regulations. They are tougher than Europe, and it's upgrade our cost of productions. And one rule of the UNPT is to be very clear and very effective to keep the cost of production as low as possible.
Thank you, Arnaud. Okay. Representing Germany, Sylvia Schleker.
So hello everybody, my name is Sylvia Schleker. I'm coming from Germany, and actually together with my family we're also running a farm in the west of Germany. I'm here because I'm also board member of the NEPG introduced by Victor, and I'm board member of the REKA Rhineland, which is the largest potato growers organization in Germany, representing about 1,100 potato growers, growing potatoes on about 27,000 hectares in the west of Germany. The growing organization, so the REKA, is responsible for market information, price information, what we're doing weekly. And we are also responsible for information flow between the growers, our members, and the traders. And we're doing services in certification of the growers for potato growing. So some interesting facts about Germany. First of all, you all have these numbers, and as you can see, within these 5 countries, Germany is producing most of the potatoes, so more than 8 million tons. On the other side, potato production in Germany is very heterogeneous. And one of our strengths lies in production of early potatoes, so we are always a little bit earlier than Netherlands and Belgium. And on the other hand, the majority of our main crop for processing that is produced in especially west of Germany is going for processing into the Netherlands and Belgium. Yeah, that's basically anything I want to tell you at this moment.
Thank you, Sylvia. We have our main speaker talking about the study tour that we embarked upon in February 2015. And Mark is going to share his observations for what he described as quite an interesting week spent across the main countries of Northwest Europe. So Mark, would you like to share with us some of your observations from the study tour?
Yeah. I went out there, like many growers here, searching for questions as to how and why we could improve our growing of potatoes, thinking that all the answers lay in Europe. You know, they seem to be able to produce potatoes cheaper than we can, better than we can. That was the perception. In reality, and Jay will back this up, the costs seem to be very, very similar to ours when we got out there, which was a surprise to us as growers. Depending on the soil types and the regions, you know, very similar to the 1,800 to 2,200 or whatever figures we perceive our growing to be. The farms were well financed, well organised, and profitable. They'd had some very profitable years. The differences fundamentally seem to come from PCN. We saw very little evidence of widespread PCN problems. You know, over in the UK, we spend our life worrying about PCN levels and varietal choice and chemical application, but over there it seemed to be much less of an issue. The evidence that we did see of it was the decline in Binji production, and it seemed to be the suggestion was that Binji production had deteriorated, the output had deteriorated, and we as a group we were putting that down to PCN issues. although this was never verified. You know, we didn't see any evidence of PCN counts, and the newer varieties were coming forward to show an increase in production of Fontaines, Innovators, etc. And as a group, we put that down to the PCN levels. One of the other differences we saw compared with UK growing was there seemed to be, on the farms we went to, very little evidence of destoning as an operation, and we all know the costs involved with that. Certainly the farms we went to see, you know, there were very few operations that were destoning. The third difference was the way they look at casual labour. In the UK, on your average potato farm, casual labour is a big part of the cost of growing potatoes and comes from outside sources, whether it's gang labour or you know, agency labour. That's a big part of our cost of growing. Certainly in Belgium particularly, it's very much family labour. The relatives who are not working on the farms, working in the towns, have their holidays to coincide with the potato harvest, and it's all hands to the pump there, and aunties and uncles and everybody rolls the sleeves up to get the harvest done. Certainly on the labour front in Belgium, it seemed as though the potato growing was based on smaller units that probably viable for one family member to operate on. If they grew a small acreage of potatoes, that enabled the son to get involved with the business on a full-time basis as opposed to working in the town. And they were using the potatoes as a means of making the total farm turnover bigger, almost at the expense of profitability. That was another observation. Another observation was we were starting to see more collaboration between farms, and Nova Farm was a fine example of that, where 3 or 4 farmers had pooled their resources very effectively. It's not something we see particularly in the UK. I don't think we're very good at it over here, but they'd highlighted the various strengths of the businesses within the collaboration and taken that forward, and it was rolling out. It was something that that people were adding to, and it was growing, and it was very successful. The big thing that cropped up time and time again, and I don't think we quite got to the bottom of it, and I think there's more work to be done, Phil will probably agree, is the crop. Certainly the processing crops that we saw are sold to the processor. That's one conversation. The processor takes 100% of the crop. That is then contracted a percentage of it at a prefixed price. Another percentage of it is marketed on a min-max basis, but then the processor will take the whole crop and deal with the surpluses to the agreements. And the big discussion all the time was they take that on a whole crop basis. There's no grading. It's taken on a 35 mil up basis into the factory. And obviously, when you look around the farms in the UK with £100,000 graders and the associated staffing levels, you know, there seems to be a difference there in the way the crops are handled. But fundamentally, there was no magic formula for producing cheap potatoes. It was accumulation of those various factors and the will to push on. And, you know, there was a real spirit out there. They were not looking to retract their acreages. Most of the growers we went to were looking to increase the potato business. They were, you know, even though they're operating at levels below ours, they were positive about the future. They'd had 1 in 2 or 3 good years, invested in machinery, and we're looking to progress.
We have some footage of our study tour. Thank you, Mark. We are pleased to announce that we will be running a second study tour to complete our tour of Northwest Europe, primarily focusing on Germany, which is a country that we did not visit in 2015. And we will be leaving, hopefully, on the 21st of February for a 6-day tour, which will encapsulate primarily Germany, but also a refresher in the Netherlands and Belgium. If you would like details, please come to see me on the information desk. Our main speaker is Mr. Jay Wootton. Jay has spent an inordinate amount of time working within the potato sector and producing reports for us, looking at the trend changes in the cost of production for Northwest Europe on processing potatoes. We have just released, and we have given you all a copy of the latest report, which does build on the reports that we have issued for the last sort of 11 years. So Jay, would you come over and just talk through some of the trends that we have observed?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Northwest European cost of production, quite a mouthful, and I'd like to start probably by reminding everyone that in order to come up with any impressions of cost of production, we have to look at an awful lot of information, and importantly, you will all know in this room that variations are extreme between countries, between regions, even in parishes, as we all know. People do things differently and achieve at different levels. So I think the important thing is what we're trying to do is give an impression of the indicative levels that we're talking about that can be backed up by a wide base of data. We're trying to, instead of looking at individual situations, look at aggregated data which has been reliably collected and put together by the costings organisations, and then to try and examine that to see what the key issues are. Over the time period that we've been looking at cost of production in Northwest Europe, there has been change, and Mark alluded to, for example, collaboration, which is something we've seen more of. But I don't suppose I'm going to surprise anyone when I say that change happens slowly in this industry. And so there has been an evolution rather than a revolution. Mark talked a little bit about cost similarities, and I guess we saw a lot of things which we could say were very, very similar. I'm going to come along to suggest where some of the differences lie, as Mark noted, in the sort of things we saw in terms of cultivation, storage, and so on. But if we look at the overall background, Victor mentioned to begin with, why are you always so much more price in GB? And where does that come from? And I guess one of the things that we have to examine is not only price, but cost of production, in order to answer the question, is there any more margin? In the background, the Netherlands has been, as Victor alluded to, a pioneer of processing and is now a relatively mature processing country. And Daniel mentioned Belgium coming up on the inside rails to overtake in recent times with a very, very dynamic development in their industry. In France, there is a significant industry in northeast France, importantly serving a pool of market which goes between Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. We have to cope with the Channel. There's a motorway directly between French farms and Belgian and Dutch processors, and often the farms are delivering to all of those destinations by rotation, which is quite important. I think we had to deal with a number of misconceptions, and that was something that I believe one or two people on the study tour would agree. There were things that you think were happening, cooperative grading and harvesting, the fact that farmers are full-time, not part-time, and thinking that the small businesses can't compete and indeed may have to think about their future very carefully. I think it's important that we look at all the common factors that go on as well in the countries that we're talking about, but everywhere we went, we saw increases in rental, which will not be surprising to anyone in the room, significant increases in rental. Potato land is scarce, and potato growers want to grow potatoes, and we heard about the positive nature of what was going on, wanting to grow more. So the pressures are very similar, even though scale can be smaller. Indeed, a comment that was made to us by a grower was, "I've got stores, I'll fill them," which may not be an entirely unfamiliar strategy for a number of businesses. And I think looking at similarities, there are some challenges as well. Sugar beet, been talking with Arnaud this morning about the challenges of sugar beet going forward. Those of us from the eastern counties will know that well, and I suppose the health warning, and you would expect me to give you a health warning on something, is that we've got to be careful about area and sugar beet and what is going to go on in the coming period. The other common factors that I think we need to consider in looking at cost of production are the heavy investment that goes on in this industry. We've seen the fact that there is significant investment. This isn't all being done on a shoestring. And then to look at the differences. And one of the significant differences, and this is all in the report, these are shots from the report, so you'll find the data there. But we have the euro, which acts for us and against us by rotation. And it's currently helping continental exporters quite significantly, having the euro in the position that it currently is. The size of farms is a significant difference, as we've already mentioned, as is the fact there's little, if any, full-time staff in most of the countries that we're looking at, and a greater than 45 mil changing at the moment from 35 to 40 mil specification, loading everything out of the door from a bulk store. So those differences are really very, very important to us looking forward. In terms of putting together the costings, obviously, as I said to you before, and apologies for those of you at the back, telescopes aren't provided, but it's a bit small. But it's really to show that there are enormously different ways of recording cost. And one of the things we have to do is to try and aggregate the data, and the granularity of it is lost, but the overall figures are robust. And I think it's very important that we look at the issues that differentiate the continental growing from ours. And the key things that are common to us are how do we account for farmer labour, rent and finance. And when we're looking at the differences, we'll come to, in a minute, a number of areas and ranges that are really very important. I think when we put the costs together, we've seen a trend over time that the actual order of cost has been the same between the countries. So there hasn't been a great change between the countries individually. There's been a general order of cost. Putting it together, and this again is a screenshot from the report, the figures are all there, but I blanked out a box there which is the 2012, and the Belgian comment excludes farmer labour, relates to the 2012 figures. Because I wanted to really concentrate on talking about the perception of cost as opposed to the model of full cost that we've gleaned from the data. And these are on relatively normalised numbers. 2012, as we'll all remember, was a very difficult year and not one that led to very representative costs overall. it was a huge opportunity for the continental farmer to export his potato production. We've seen last year a year which was extremely difficult with very high yields and very, very low prices. So if we iron all those things out and look at the generality, remembering that the rental levels in the Netherlands are significantly higher than anyone else's, going back to the land value that we spoke about earlier, we have to separate what people talk about as being the production cost of potatoes from where we think it truly may be. And the general perception, and we've always talked about Belgium, and I know a number of people on the study tour were astonished to hear discussions going on about potatoes being produced comfortably at 80 euros a tonne, which has to bear some investigation. But of course, when you look at the overall approach that's taken to costings, what is included in the 80 euros a tonne? And I'm picking on that as being an extreme number. And in a number of cases, we found data being presented to growers and more widely, which, for example, didn't include farmer labour. These figures would do, but didn't. These presentations were being made without farmer labour on the basis that that was your cost, and if you made some money from it, that was your margin. Won't compare with our type of presentation and expectation of costings at all. The Dutch figures then, 110 to 120, I think was representative of what the perception is of production cost. And don't forget, this is in euros. Belgium, 80 to 110. France, in a similar range, northeast France to Belgium. And the British cost of production, as you'll see, phased out there on the right-hand side, the sterling values from the model can be seen. And when we look at full cost, we see that northeast France and Belgium are very similar for differing reasons, because, for example, in Belgium, the seed cost tends to be lower because of a high percentage of binge, and some of the other costs in France tend to be lower because of scale, because comparing a Belgian farm with a French farm, you're looking at a very different average hectare farm, and costs therefore are different. In the Netherlands, you would expect to see problems with PCN and things like that creeping in, but they're not there. We don't see big costs of PCN. Yields, and I have to point out that I'm afraid there's a glitch in the system. That euro sign there shouldn't be there. It's tons a hectare, not euros tons a hectare. But looking at that those average yields, we have to remember in the background of the average yield that this is delivering everything 40 mil up to the factory, which has an impact on yield. So as you can see, if we apply the full cost, including allowance for depreciation, family labour, rent and finance, these numbers come out significantly more than the numbers, the perception that is often talked about in the Netherlands, Belgium and France. And I think the important thing there is to look again at what the impact of the sort of range of euro exchange that we've had in the recent past has been. I'd like to move on to really talk about some of the things that go into making these numbers different. And I focus on simplicity. Simplicity in varieties, simplicity in specification, 40 mil up. The change of varieties is having an impact on yield. Clearly, as Binji gets changed into more modern varieties with higher yield potential and higher quality potential, then this is going to mean an increase, a natural increase in production from the same area which is quite an important point to bear in mind. PCM we've mentioned. Cultivations, Mark touched on cultivations. I don't think we saw a destoner, or if we did, it was carefully hidden in the whole of our study tour. Irrigation, the exception rather than the rule, it would have to be said in the areas that we're talking about. Storage in bulk, little or no grading. Machinery, I believe this is an important point, owner managed and maintained. There is, although we've seen some new machinery there and nice shiny kit, there is an awful lot of kit which is very well looked after, very well maintained, and has a longer life than we're perhaps used to here. So I think there are some threats for these growers. Contract is only part of the crop on a fixed price. So 60% typically might be on a fixed price, and the remainder of the crop has to be delivered at an equivalent free market price, which may well be, as last year, something of a surprise. Mechanisation is a threat. As machines get bigger, we see the need to look at funding larger machines. Joint ventures have been mentioned, use of contractors. I was quite staggered to look at the market for self-propelled potato harvesters in Belgium, bearing in mind the scale of growers in Belgium, thinking, well, where is this market? It's because in northern Belgium, certainly, there is a predominance of use of contractors to lift potatoes, and so there is a market for large self-propelled harvesters. I'd like to just finish by talking about the basic background that's been covered already about where is the market going. We know that these costs of production that we've seen are lower. We know that the specification is different, which differentiates why can people produce at lower cost. They're producing a different specification. Many of the farmers will continue to produce, focusing on what is their cash cost rather than their full cost. It may be seen as being unsustainable, but it goes on for a very long time. And I think, importantly, we've seen a terrific development in Belgium, which has allowed an increase and soaking up production from processing, where we've probably seen yield increases. Bintude generally has reduced over time. We've seen yield increases, and it's all been soaked up in this enormously successful Belgian development. The health warning might be currency. What happens if currency changes? That could well be a significant issue. In this country, the trend we know of reduced fresh consumption and moving on to processing, have we really got the capacity to allow enough people to move from fresh to processing in this country? And where that development goes in the longer term, should we be more dynamic about exports? I think we should. And I think to finish with, just to let you know, on the freezer shelf in a German supermarket while we were doing our tour, looking for information, we could find French fries at 80 euro cents in the freezer in parts of northwest Europe, which, if we think about that in terms of getting them from the farm and into the freezer, is a fairly scary figure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. Now it's our panel session where we get the opportunity to ask a few questions. I'm going to take the opportunity to ask my question, and this is to Daniel. Daniel, we're hearing that Belgian growers have a new crop monitoring system available to them. Could you share with us what that is?
Yes, surely. So last year in June 2014, Belgapom, which is the body which regroups packers and processors, set up a 3-year project which is called IPOT, Industrial Potato Monitoring for the Belgian potato sector. They are also working with 3 scientific research bodies, one of them being the Walloon Research Center where FIWAP is based. And the idea is that the last years, the industry has been using ever more potatoes, and that there is a big interannual variation in yield and in quality. And so in the future, the industry wants to monitor that. And they want to monitor it differently than just with trial digs or with quality analysis when potatoes come into at packers level or in processors. So since last year, there has been field monitoring, 40 fields of Binch, 40 fields of Fontane, and 10 fields of Nicola. There are 10 processors and packers who have rejoined this project. And the idea is to compare trial digs done by processors on producers' fields with satellite follow-up of all the potato fields. And we also have reference fields with crop scanning at ground level and image drones done with drones in a few reference parcels. So the idea is to, in the next year and in 2017, is to have to fine-tune the results we get with trial digs with the ones we get with satellite images and drone images. The industry and contractor growers, they want to know what's happening in the fields during the summer. How is the crop evolving? Which are the inside field variations? Because variations in fields can be very important. So where do we have to do the trial digs? Where do we have to scan? Because the industry and the packers want to know how is the crop evolving? Are there any problems? Are there differences between fields planted early, fields planted late, fields planted in the west of the country, fields planted in the east of the country? And so by following up all these fields, IPOT wants to create an electronic exchange platform between processors and growers. So growers will get their information and will be able to benchmark it with the results in the same district or the same province or the same agricultural region. So the idea is to have a better follow-up of yield, quality, and evolution during the season. That's at least some information about IPOT.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now it's your opportunity to ask a few questions. We should have a roving mic. Do we have a roving mic? Maybe not. Could you speak loudly?
Cedric Porter from World Potato Markets. Question really for Daniel. In terms of Vinci's had a very difficult year this year, are we going to see people moving away from Vinci to Challenger, Innovator, Fontana? And also, are we seeing an ageing population of farmers in Belgium? And so in the next sort of 10, 20 years, will those farmers retire and then you're going to see bigger farms with perhaps a larger sort of cost structure?
Starting with your last question, certainly, but I think it's a problem in the whole of northwestern Europe. Farmers aging and less young farmers wanted to take over the farm. That's surely a big problem in the years to come. Talking about Binche, of course, every year when, let's say, we have that kind of problem every 5 years or something with regrowth and problems with underwater weights which are too low and so forth. When we have a Binche problem year, of course, the industry reacts and says, look, we have a problem, we should be moving to another variety. And then when the Binche grows lovely, like 2 or 3 years ago, well, Binche goes up again. But the general trend is Binche is going down slowly and other varieties are going up. And this year, more than other years, there is more interest for Fontane, Innovator, Marquise, Royal, Lady Anna, and other varieties. And I think some bean sugar growers are getting a bit nervous because processors are now buying, mostly on the free market, they are buying other varieties. And so, yeah.
Could that push the price, the cost of production up, by more people going for those newer varieties? Can that push the cost of production up,
Well,
but also the yield up as well?
The seed costs will go up, but because a Fontan and an innovator produce between 4 to 10 tons more, they will catch what they lose with a higher seed, they will get back with higher yields.
But that could be a risk for everyone else, that Belgium's producing even more potatoes, and so they could, next year we could be seeing more of a surplus if there's a good harvest next year.
Well, there is, when you have a good year and good rainfall and good sunshine, there is always a risk of having too much potatoes, yeah.
Thank you, Cedric. Do we have another question? I didn't expect you to all be shy and retiring. I have a question for France. Arnaud, one of the things that we observed in the study tour was some discussion with one of the French growers who was talking about potential changes taking place in contract negotiations, where you could be moving to a more demanding specification and more longer-term contracts.
Yeah, thank you. You've got two questions, actually. First of all, there is a move in the kind of contract, and the other question is a longer contract. I would say for the first questions, there is a move in the demand of the processors, such as McCain, and the move is following the request of his main customer, which is, McDo. McDo is, as in France, a kind of, study field for new stores and a new way to sell the fries. He is expecting products with a better diet, impact, and a better footprint, carbon footprint. And so McCain is asking the farmers to use new technology, which could permit to have a better impact on environment with no irrigation or less irrigation, so the new varieties are done for this reason, and also to use some new techniques, for example, for the phytosanitary protection. That's the new techniques, and CIPC as well, storage facilities. For long term, it's different. The long term contract is to set up with the customer, the final customers, a kind of also a long-term contract to fix the price and to avoid, the move during the years. So for that way, the farmers are engaged with McCain and with the other ones on a 2 or 3 years basis. And the price is fixed for those 3 years. The problem is in France, this price can't be moved by the cost of productions. So if we've got an increase of the fuel production, for example, or phytosanitary product cost, it can't be impacted in the contract price. But that's a way to go to the market. The other thing is in France, but I guess it's probably the same in Great Britain and in other countries, for process industry, a global gap certification is requested for all the farmers. So we are pretty sure that the farmers are using good techniques to produce potatoes.
Thanks, Arnaud.
The main point.
Question at the back there.
I was actually on that trip as well, and I thought that one of the factors was that sugar beet has been such a high price for so long. I think that has given the farmers confidence to take a gamble on the potato industry, and I think that will change as the sugar beet price comes down. Also, it seems to me that the Fiji is almost like a brick. It doesn't need any problem in storage at all, whereas the newer varieties, I know from experience, are a lot more difficult to get
Yeah, you've got also two remarks. And the first one is very, very interesting, the second one as well. But the move on the price of sugar, I am a farmer, and as I told you, I am a farmer in the northern part of France, but in the sugar beet production area. And I manage a farm of 300 hectares, and on those 300 hectares, I've got 100 hectares of sugar beets and 50 hectares of potatoes. And I used to say to my accounts and to Jay as well, that in the past, the profitability of the sugar beets could pay all the investment on potatoes, as a return on the tax, not paid. And it was the way we have financed actually our profitability and our investment on potatoes. And now we have to find out in the potatoes the profitability to continue the productions. In the same things, I would say that in the northern part of France, it was very close to Belgium, where the family workers paid, as they were not paid, they paid for the profitability or the non-profitability of potatoes. And now they will have to pay for all the workers. So if the industry is not profitable, it will stop as well. So that's why the study tour is very important for GB. It's also important for France. We are going to study the new model of production in France. As I told you, we've got 3 industries in France for potatoes. I would say 4 with the seeds. The fresh market, the process market for, in food industry, and the process market for starch industry. For starch industry, I guess the model will have to be as close as the sugar beet model as possible, with contract, with structure, contractor, and so. For the fresh market, we've got a value market, which is, as it's one of the strengths of the fresh market in France, with a good segmentations and a quite high level of profitability. But we have also to find out export market for the mass market for the fresh market, because all the potatoes won't be at the top level for domestic or European consumption. That's the business. And for the process market, as it has been told, we almost export the same level as we consume in France for the process market. We export those potatoes to Belgium. So we are very linked actually to the Belgian industry. That's, as Daniel said, in France, we don't use binge anymore. We still have some, binge producers, but it's quite on the process market. It's decreasing very quickly to go to new varieties, which are more suitable for sustainable production of rice. Binges required irrigations, required a lot of phytosanitary protections and things like that, while new varieties could be more rustic and more efficient in tough conditions. We have seen that this year.
Thanks, Arnaud. Can I ask the other panel members if they could pass a comment on the impact or potential impact that the sugar beet reform may have in their country on potato production? Victor?
I guess in a short-term time, it will be quite neutral because the sugar beet factories are working, average working in France 80 days per year, and they are expecting to develop their volume to 110 to 120 like in GB per year. So they are looking for new fields for productions. So the degrees of production in some areas, which could compete to potatoes, will be transferred to increase of production in other areas. So it will, in my opinion, in the future, coming from the future, it will remain quite steady. Yeah. But in the long term, we'll see.
The Netherlands, do you have a view?
I think for the Netherlands it's the same situation as for the other NEPG countries. Sugar beets will remain, of course, an important item, but different and less than in the past. Also in the Netherlands we are looking for other opportunities, shifts. Over the last years we've seen opportunities to grow more onions, because our export of fresh onions is growing rapidly, and there is space for another large increase for the onion area. And well, we also have a starch industry like France, like Germany, and also there you see some shifts. Very interesting to see is that the starch processing growers are using so-called dual-purpose varieties, which they can use for their starch factories, which they have to deliver, but which they can also use for processing only in those years that the prices for regular processing potatoes are sky high. Then you see a movement from dual-purpose starch potatoes towards the human consumption. Same you see it the other way. Last year, when the prices were super low, you see that a lot of processing potatoes moved into the starch industry. Well, the UK has no starch industry, maybe unfortunately, because in some years it could be an outlet for potatoes.
Terribly sorry, but we're going to have to cut it off short. I've had the dreaded wind up from my boss. So many thanks to the panel and Jay Wootton and primarily Mark Jones for his participation in the study tour and the observations that you've shared with us. I'd ask you to thank the panel in the usual way.